Ichibe holds the title of the monk who calls the real name. He's the leader of the Zero Division, the most ancient Shinigami in existence, and he's arguably the closest being to the Soul King within the entire Bleach universe. But for one reason or another, a lot of readers have absolutely no idea who Ichibe actually is. There are endless debates about whether if Aizen or Yhwach is the true villain of Bleach, and people will argue about power levels and matchups about who could beat who, but the character who sits at the absolute center of the Bleach world, who was there before the creation of the Soul Society, gets reduced to the big jolly monk who lost to Yhwach. Ichibe is the one who built the lie that the entire Bleach universe runs on. He has spent over 1,000,000 years pretending to be the guardian of the Soul King. He was first introduced in chapter 516 following the death of Yamamoto as he arrived smiling. The Gotei 13 had just been torn apart as their captain commander was killed, the Serite was in ruins, and this bald monk shows up wrapping his arm around Tenjiro Karinji with that ridiculous grin like nothing had happened. A lot of us initially took this as insensitivity or foolishness. Ichibe as a being is so far beyond the conflicts of the Gotei 13 that devastating losses like the death of Yamamoto barely registered to him. Over the course of this video, you're going to understand just how unsettling Ichibe's smiling expression is. There are a few characters that are more misunderstood than Ichibe within Bleach. These are the incredible people who have subscribed to the channel. Only 20% of the people who watch these videos are subscribed, so if you enjoy these videos and want to see more, then hit the bell icon and the subscribe button. Ichibe has one of the largest roles within Bleach, similar to individuals who on the surface present friendly, approachable or goofy demeanors. Think of characters like Urahara with his fan and bucket hat, Shunsui with the laid-back attitude and the floral kimono. Ichibe has the enormous grin and his booming personality, but underneath all of these masks, these characters share a single objective, which is to maintain the balance of the world at any cost. They don't want a disruption to the status quo. What separates Ichibe from Urahara and Shunsui and others like them is what he is concealing. Urahara conceals his dark scientific impulses behind his eccentric shopkeeper routine. Shunsui masks his cynicism with charm, but Ichibe is hiding something so unsettling that it's the foundational crime of the entire reality of Bleach, and he's dressed this sin up with the authority that he holds within the Zero Division. When Ichibe decides to kill Yhwach during their fight, his eyes turn completely white. The jolly round face contorts into something genuinely monstrous. He develops this sadistic grin as he prepares to erase Yhwach from existence. Yhwach himself comments that Ichibe seemed to become happier once he resolved to kill him. He relishes in violence, he delights in brutality. The cheerful exterior is wrapping paper over something deeply predatory. I think it's very deliberate that Kubo has portrayed Ichibe in this way. Even Shunsui and Mayuri have openly questioned Ichibe's motives at different points within the story, and I think that the Shinigami of the Gotei 13 are right in not to totally trust Ichibe. There's even a contradiction in his visual design. He's a giant monk with prayer beads that evoke religious and spiritual imagery. His personal palace, Raidon, is a historical temple shrine located on top of a mountain that can only be reached after ascending a colossal stone staircase. Every visual cue surrounding Ichibe screams enlightenment and spiritual truth. Think to how Renji learns the true name of his Bankai, or Ichigo undergoes the intense training along the path of Irazusando. Training with Ichibe is enough to change the life of a Shinigami, but the truth under his holy shrine is revealed within the Can't Be Unworld light novels. Within Volume 3, Ichibe himself reveals the true history of the Bleach universe, and it's deeply unsettling. Originally, reality wasn't divided into Hueco Mundo, the world of the living, and the Soul Society. Instead, everything existed as a singular realm in a time known as the Primordial Age. There was no life or death. Progression and regression was flickering on and off consistently, and the world was in a state of ambiguity that had persisted for over 100 million years before things started to stabilize. Eventually, hollows emerged within the Primordial Age and they started to devour human inhabitants, thus disrupting the balance of circulating souls. This then gave rise to the first Menos Grande. In response to this, a transcendent being had emerged, one of near omnipotent power. You guessed it, this was the Soul King. The Soul King destroyed the Hollows and protected the Primordial Age, but 5 powerful individuals emerged. These were the ancestors of the 5 great noble families. They decided that they wanted to bring structure to reality, as they wanted control over how things were progressing. So they brought in another primordial being who had emerged around the same time as the Soul King. This being was none other than Ichibei Hyosube. Now, Ichibei wasn't ordered to work for the ancestors of the 5 great noble families. He in fact chose to work alongside them. Together they ambushed the Soul King and captured him. The ancestor from the Tsuneyashiro clan took a leadership role, as the remaining ancestors spent a great deal of time carving out the Soul King's heart, whittling away his legs, scalping out all of his internal organs, and removing all of this from his body. They dismembered the omnipotent Soul God and crammed what remained into a crystalline structure. The Soul King became a limbless, voiceless battery, neither alive or dead. He was forced to maintain the balance of the 3 newly separated realms for all eternity. Ichibei was there for all of this. He participated in the ambush and assisted the ancestors of the noble families throughout the mutilation, and then he was assigned to guard the very being that he helped to take down. Ichibei claims that the Soul King cooperated willingly. He speculates that the Soul King may have foreseen the future via an early form of the Almighty and concluded that agreeing with the ancestors was the best option, but Ichibei himself openly admits that this is mere speculation. He pushes the narrative that the Soul King chose this fate, while acknowledging that he doesn't know if it's true. From what we know, Ichibei is the only surviving witness to what occurred during the Primordial Age. Ichibei proclaims himself to be the guardian of the Soul King's will. He claims to understand what the Soul King wants, but the light novels point out something important. The Soul King is a powerless puppet incapable of speech. Senjumaru reiterates that he was unable to voice the ways in which reality was governed. They don't even know if his body can inhale or exhale air, let alone communicate or consent to governance. Within Confia Onworld, Ichibei states that the Soul King's will can be sensed by those whose bones are turned into Oken, the members of the Zero Division who have entrusted a part of their souls to the Royal Palace. Within chapter 564, it's revealed that the Soul King bestowed upon Ichibei his title, and in chapter 519, the Soul King opens his eyes, almost as if acknowledging what is being said to him. So there is some form of rudimentary awareness there, but the gulf between the Soul King can open his eyes and the Soul King actively directs Ichibei's actions is enormous, and Ichibei bridges that gulf by simply asserting his authority without anyone being able to verify it. Some fans theorize that he's fabricating all of this, using the Soul King's will as a pretext in order to manipulate others. The evidence does lean this way, because in a conversation with Nimaya within the Confia Onworld light novels, Nimaya points out that Ichibei can see everything that goes on in the world due to his rank as High Priest. When Nimaya remarks about the trouble being caused by Tokinara Tsuneyashiro, Ichibei casually shrugs off his concerns. He states in his own words that the role of the Zero Division is to ensure the world continues on as it always has, irrespective of who rules over the individual realms. It's not as if the foundations of creation will be altered if the leadership of Hueco Mundo, the Soul Society, or the human world changes. Emperors and captains are all temporary to him. His primary alliance lies with the ancestors of the noble families, it seems, those who built this current system, not the Soul King, who is imprisoned at the center of reality. Ichibei is a bit of a false prophet. He speaks in the name of God, claims to act according to divine will, and he spreads a version of truth that serves the system rather than the divine will of the Soul King. Ichibei could be the true sentient ruler of the Bleach cosmology. Within the light novels, we learn that Ichibei's plan for Ichigo was far worse than anyone suspected within the manga. Ichibei didn't train Ichigo out of kindness. He wasn't totally building him up to defeat Yhwach, he was in fact testing him. During those anime-exclusive Irazusando scenes, Ichigo walks through a room filled with immense spiritual pressure within the royal palace. Here, he forms a powerful connection with the Soul King as he receives fragments of the Soul King's memories. His eyes take on an appearance similar to Yhwach when he activates the Almighty, with multiple irises emerging. Ichibei was actually measuring Ichigo's power levels to see if he could withstand the burden of the 3 realms. He was evaluating whether if Ichigo was a worthy Soul King candidate. If Yhwach had not consumed the remains of the Soul King after killing the Soul King, then Ichigo would have been the replacement Soul King. Ichibei would have had to kill him, cut up his body, and used his partial conscious corpse as the new Soul King. Ichigo would have then been within a crystalline structure as an empty vessel governing over the balance of reality. Despite a million years since the Soul King was mutilated, it seems like Ichibe has learnt nothing, as he was willing to recommit the original sin but now on a teenager. And this is genuinely sickening to think about. During a conversation between Shunsui and Ichibe following the 1000-year Blood War arc, they gaze at Yhwach's corpse, who is now serving as the replacement Soul King. Shunsui states that he's relieved Ichigo didn't need to be cut down. Ichibe responds that Ichigo got lucky because he didn't expect him to survive his battle against Yhwach. He had no regret or remorse in his voice. It was just acknowledgement that had circumstances been slightly different, then he would have done to Ichigo exactly what was done to the Soul King. When Hisagi learns about this in the light novels, his entire manner of speech shifts. There's clear contempt in his voice, because the process of becoming the Soul King is so horrifying that even Yhwach wouldn't wish it on his worst enemy. In chapter 613 of the manga, Yhwach offers to lay Ichigo to rest, telling him he'll be destroyed by the cogs of fate. This is a direct reference to Ichibe's plans. The villain of the arc considered what Ichibe had in store for Ichigo to be a fate worse than death. And then there is chapter 612. After Yhwach impales the Soul King, Ichibe mutters to himself that Ichigo and the others have nothing to fear, because this is what peace is all about. Ichibe did hesitate before sending them, that he apologized for the burden that he's placing on them, but he still sent them to fight Yhwach. He told Ichigo that the fate of reality was in his hands, but he knew full well that Ichigo had no chance of defeating Yhwach, and he was okay with this outcome, because either way, Ichibe's objective would have been served. Either Ichigo would weaken Yhwach enough for intervention, or Ichigo's defeat would set up the conditions for his transformation into the new Soul King. Can you believe that these sickening plans were coming from a character who has one of the biggest, jolliest grins in the entire series? Ichibe Zanbakuto Ichimonji has a very thematically appropriate ability. His power derives from the color black. Every time he releases Ichimonji, all of the color black from all beings, whether they are dead or alive, becomes his power. In its Shikai state, anything that is ink covers loses its name and its powers. Within its Bankai, which he calls Shinouchi, because the term Bankai didn't exist when he first achieved an evolved Zanbakuto form, he is able to write new names onto his targets, bestowing upon them the properties of whatever he's named them. He renamed Yhwach to Black Ant, reducing the Emperor of the Quincy to the power of a literal insect. Futen Taisatsu Ryo goes even further than this. This technique takes away all of the darkness in his opponent, their flesh, blood and bones, until nothing is left. Their destruction is so absolute that they will not even reincarnate. He reaches into the far-flung future as he steals the color black from 100 nights in 100 years ahead in order to fuel his technique. Even the sealed form of his Zanbakuto has a passive ability which virtually no other Zanbakuto in the series possesses. When Yhwach deflected the sealed brush with his arm, his physical strength was immediately carved in half because the name of his limb was split. This happened just from touching the sealed Zanbakuto. Ichibe can write kanji on surfaces that function literally. He wrote the character for conceal in front of the royal palace and it vanished entirely from sight. He wrote seal and created a blockade that neither he nor Yhwach could pass. If he can write any word and have it manifest, then the ceiling on his power is whatever he can put to ink, and this is actually terrifying. Within Bleach, names have always been the source of power. A Zanbakuto's name unlocks his abilities, a true name unleashes full potential. Renji only accessed his complete power after Ichibe revealed the real name of his Bankai, and Ichibe is the one who is responsible for naming all things, including Zanbakuto, Shikai, Bankai, and all of the phenomenon that occur within the Soul Society. So his power over names is power over reality itself. This is why he functions as a kind of avatar for Kubo himself, but on a meta level. He wields ink. The manga is drawn in ink. When Ichibe fights, it's as though he's controlling the page itself. His ink changes the color of speech bubbles. He writes, rewrites, and blots out the world and characters of the narrative. Like take for example when Ichigo first meets Old Man Zangetsu, he tries to reveal to Ichigo his true name, but black ink blocks out what Old Man Zangetsu is saying. Kubo on his fan club had confirmed that this in fact was Ichibe intervening in the story way ahead of time. This is hundreds of chapters before he is first introduced. Now the anime expanded upon the backstory of Ichibe and Yhwach within episode 24 of the 1000-year Blood War arc anime. Ichibe personally traveled to the human world in order to negotiate a truce with Yhwach's Empire of Light over 1,000 years ago. He proposed that the Quincy could unify freely as long as they let the Shinigami maintain balance without interfering with them, but the negotiation was a setup. Ichibe came armed with both the Soul King's left arm and right arm hidden within him, similar to how Ukitake carried Mimihagi inside of his body. When Yhwach activated the Almighty, Ichibe used the left arm Pernida in order to steal Yhwach's eyes and shut them permanently, and separately he used the right arm Mimihagi to deflect an attack from one of Yhwach's Schutzstaffel, stopping the arrows mid-air with his right fist. It's contradictory that he came to conduct peace talks while carrying two divine weapons. Yhwach received visions of the Soul King's past during this encounter. He also witnessed Ichibe present at every stage of the mutilation of the Soul King, and he was left visibly shaken. Ichibe's response was to calmly reaffirm that he knew nothing, while the left arm of the Soul King engulfed Yhwach and forcibly closed the Almighty. After it was sealed, Yhwach was weakened enough to be defeated by Yamamoto during the first Quincy invasion. So you could say Ichibe orchestrated the conditions for the defeat of Yhwach's Empire of Light over 1,000 years ago. When it comes to the backstory of Ichibe, there's very little that we know about him, but the 1,000-Year Blood War arc anime has been dropping breadcrumbs, showing shadowy flashbacks of Ichibe cradling the mutilated Soul King. Then, within the No Breathes from Hell one-shot chapter, it establishes that the balance between Hell and the outside world has been disrupted. Powerful Captain-class Shinigami like Yamamoto, Unohana, and Ukitake have been sent to Hell because their Reiatsu concentration is too high to return to the Earth of the Soul Society. Hell is now spilling over into the human world, and with Aizen imprisoned in Muken and Yhwach's spiritual pressure having disappeared about 10 years earlier, there's nothing that's offsetting this imbalance now. Kazui Kurosaki, Ichigo's son, can open portals to Hell, and he's been mistakenly sending souls there instead of to the Soul Society. With Ichibe being aware of this, there's every chance that he would move to seal away Kazui's powers using Ichimonji, just as he sealed away Yhwach's Almighty with the Soul King's left arm. The Hell one-shot kind of confirmed that the former captains of the original Gotei 13 have also spent hundreds of years within Hell, so you could say that they would have a vendetta against the current Gotei 13 and Ichibe himself, who represents the head of the system that betrayed them. If they've grown stronger within the realm of Hell, a confrontation between the original Gotei 13 and the Zero Division becomes a real possibility, and I'm really excited to see if Kubo is going to give Ichibe a special role within the Hell arc that a lot of fans have been looking forward to seeing. Hell predates the split of reality. It existed during the primordial age. If anybody in Bleach has knowledge about what's really going on in Hell, it's Ichibe. And knowing Ichibe, he'll reveal exactly enough to serve his purposes and deliberately conceal the rest of the information. The reason that nobody really understands Ichibe is because Kubo's designed him to be unknowable and mysterious. I look forward to any new information that we'll be getting within Core 4 of the 1,000-Year Blood War arc anime, and I'm super excited to see what Kubo releases next in manga form as a continuation to the Hell arc one-shot. But now we've reached the point of the video where I want to hand over the discussion to all of you. What are your thoughts on Ichibe? Do you think that he was justified in what he planned for Ichigo? Do you think that the Hell arc will finally force his character into the spotlight? And do you think that the anime is going to be revealing any new backstory about Ichibe during Core 4 of the 1,000-Year Blood War arc anime? If there's anything that I've forgotten to mention, then let me know by continuing the discussion in the comments. And lastly, thanks for making it to the end of this one, and I look forward to seeing you in my next Bleach video.
A massive thank you goes out to all of my amazing Patreon supporters for helping to make this video possible. If you also want to support the channel and see your name in the end of my videos, then check out my Patreon, which has loads of perks like early video access and so much more. Thank you for sticking around till the end of the video, and whatever you contribute will mean a lot to me.